Hello everyone. Today we will look at how we can use the caching mechanism. How can we basically store data into the caching, or after saving the data into the caching, how we are going to get those data from the caching. So basically this caching mechanism we are going to check using the EHCache. So EHCache is one of the implementation of caching provider, we can say. So how we are going to store data from the caching and how we are going to fetch those data from the caching using EHCache in Spring Boot 3. So as we are going to EHCache, so let me briefly introductions about this EHCache. EHCache is basically open source library which is implemented using Java for like its Java programs, especially local and distributed caches in main memory or on the maybe into the file system or the hard disks we can store. EHCache is fully compatible with Java X caching API. So due to these compatibilities actually, integrations with Spring or Hibernate is very easy. So before we are going to start how we are going to caching mechanism, let's have a very quick look of what is a cache, and in which scenarios basically we are going to use this caching mechanism. Then we will take a quick look at how caching is work in the Spring. Along with that also I will show one demo with where actually I will create one Spring Boot applications, and there I will try to create one REST controller and then demonstrated how we are going to store the data into the caching using the EHCache3, and also like how we are going to fetch those data from the caching. So from the version wise EHCache, I'm going to use the EHCache version 3. So that is the latest one, so that I'm going to use with Spring Boot 3 latest version and the Java 17. And also I will show you basically for configuring the caching means we need do some kind of configurations things. So those kind of configurations basically we can do in two ways, either in using the XML or maybe just programmatically. So here actually I am explaining how we can avoid the XML kind of thing so that we can write the code into the Java program in a Java configuration file directly. Okay. So caching basically is a technique that store data in memory or a file or maybe in a disk so that we can get those data very fast. If we take one example for understanding the caching easily, let's say in our project basically, let's take one common example actually, that maybe in every project or any enterprise kind of applications we are like displaying states, city, or maybe same other kind of things which are basically the changes very rare, right? And this kind of tables we are storing data, and very means the changes is very lower. Okay, and we are storing those kind of data in a particular database in DB table. Okay, now in many places actually in enterprise applications we are showing those information like state information, or maybe in some drop down we are showing the state, and based on the selection of the state maybe we are fetching those cities. So those kind of data actually we are means showing, or maybe in a multiple place of enterprise applications or maybe any applications, right? So as those data are not basically changed from the database wise, so maybe those data can be you can store in a cache. So that, because why I'm saying store in a cache, because if we are not storing those kind of things in a caching, then it will actually basically fetch the database from the database. And for fetching the means data from the database, basically what we need to follow, basically we need to create connections, then based on the connection we need to write SQL, and then based on SQL we need to fetch those data. So it will take some time, right? And if we are storing those data into the caching, then we can easily get those data. Okay, I will show you the difference between those, after before storing the data into the caching and after storing the data into the how much time it is taking. So if we are storing those data into caching, then it will actually basically we can easily fetch the data, and it will take the less time instead of fetching data from the database. So that is the benefit of storing data into the caching, so that it will perform, it will improve the performance. Okay, and maybe there are certain other scenarios if the same data is requested again and again, like if we say one example, like the sometimes we are loading from the data from the database, and this data can be cached into the main memory or a server applications like RAM or the client browser cache. So this is also the reduce the access time and the number of the data transfers, since from the server doesn't have the repetitively request data from the database to the send to the client. So in this certain scenarios also, like we can use the caching, like if same data repetitively we are showing those things. Okay, same data is requested multiple times from the client. So that kind of like things also, there are certain logics maybe we can apply, and based on that we can store those things into the cache. So basically for in Spring or Spring Boot application actually, uh, it's very easy to add caching to an applications. So basically we need to follow some step to activate the caching mechanism. For example, there is one annotation in a Spring Boot or Spring, we can say that if we add this one like enable caching, this is one annotations. If it is basically used from the Spring Boot, and the entire caching infrastructure is configured for us. So if we use these annotations, it will do lots of things, automatically configure or automatically caching infrastructure, it will configure for us. So Spring caching service basically it's a abstractions, and it's not a basically implementation. So therefore it is necessary to use the caching provider or caching implementation for caching. So as we know, this Spring supports very wide range of this caching provider. So let's check what are those providers basically. So here, as you can see, so caching providers that I mentioned, the which are basically used nowadays. There are some more applications also there which are basically provider like EHCache3, EHCache, Couchbase, Redis, Caffeine. So those are basically like used for implement the caching in a Spring Boot application. So in this tutorial, I'm going to explain this EHCache3, how we are going to store data using this one. Like change of the caching provider basically is not effect to the existing code, as like we just it's a concept of the abstractions. And if we are not providing any no caching provider, is we are providing then Spring Boot configures simple provider basically using the memory, using the map. Okay, and next is to like EHCache caching memories area. So like how it will actually store the data. So EHCache basically configured in such a way that the caching layer can consist of more than one memory area. When we are using more than one area memory area, the areas are arranged in hierarchical tiers. Okay, the lowest tier is called the authority tier, and the other tiers are called the near cache. The most frequently used data is stored in the fastest caching tier like top layer, and the authority tier is basically contains all cache entries. This basically memories area, as I am mentioned in the bullets point like this, are having the three things like on heap store, off heap store, and the disk store. So regarding this on heap store, actually it's uses the Java heap memory to store the caching entries and to share the memory with the applications. And this cache basically obviously is not scanned by the garbage collections. This is very fast actually, but it's very limited. As you know, it's a very limited, right? Off heap means it's a RAM to store the cache entries. This is not obviously subject to the garbage collections. It's still quite fast memory, but slower than the on heap memory. And the disk store is basically it's a kind of one hard disk that where we are basically store the data. It's slower than the RAM, and we can use this one, and maybe we can use the SSD for this one also. Okay, so this is the basic idea about the EHCache, how like EHCache is what is the EHCache3 and how we are going to using this one. So for demonstrating this one, I will create one project, and for creating the project basically I will use Spring Boot 3 and then Java 17, and as ID I will use the Eclipse IDE. So that I will take, and then I will, as a dependency management tool, I will going to use the Maven. So for creating this one, I will going to use the Spring Boot starter cache, then caching API for enabling the cache, and the EHCache3. Okay, So these dependencies I'm going to use the enable, as I was mentioning for enabling the caching in the Spring Boot. Actually we are going to use the enable caching annotations, and we don't need to, like, I'll show you how we are going to add those things. So let's create the project first so that it will be easy to understand also, like how we are going to create those things. So let's create the project first so that it will be easy to understand. Okay, so for demonstrating this EHCache3, so I have created one Maven based Spring Boot 3 project from the Spring Initializer. There is a one site actually basically. So from there we can easily create the project. If you guys don't have any idea like how we are going to create the Spring Boot project, so I will share that. Already I have created one related that project. So I will like share that link in the description section. Okay. So as you can see over here, so the Spring Boot version is the latest one I have used, and Java version is 17. With that, the main dependencies for enabling the cache or use the cache is the starter web. So this dependency is basically used for, as I'm going to create one to REST APIs or REST controller. So for that actually it's needed. Okay. Next, basically, we need to use the starter cache. So this is the main actually file for using the caching kind of things. This is Java X caching. This is also needed, and this EHCache needed. So these three are basically need for enable, means use for the caching things. Caching using the caching kind of uh, like jar or maybe class it's required. So for that, these dependencies is needed, and these are the basically for development purpose. Lombok is fine also, but these are not necessary. But this four is basically necessary dependencies that basically used. Okay, so next basically what we are going to do, we are going to create the caching configuration first. Then once the caching configuration is done, then next actually basically we are going to create the controller file, and then from there we are going to call the like those services so that we will check that everything is working fine or not. Okay, so let's create one package first for creating the configuration file. So for example, it's a config. Okay, so here basically we are going to create one class first, like let's say EHConfiguration. Okay, and then we are going to annotate this particular class as a configurations, and with that also we are going to not configurable configurations, and with that also as we are going to enable the caching, so there is a enable caching annotation is there, this annotation. So this, as you can see, this annotation driven cache management capability, and this is found this XML space. So this is basically actually enable actually is ready all the things necessary for us. It will as you can see the cache manager and all the things is basically all the things it will do. So this is the purpose of the enable caching, so that we have added, we need to add basically. So once this is done basically, then we need to create one cache manager over here as a bin. And this particular cache manager, basically what we are going to do over here is basically we need to provide some configurations like that I was showing in the this slide earlier, like what will be the how we are going to store the cache into the heap memory or like in a file, so disk kind of things, when actually those cache will be expired, like how much ideal time it will take, it will stay, and then it will release those cache. So those kind of configurations we need to do over here. So let's create this particular method for this one. For example, public void then cache manager. Okay, and here basically, okay, it's a typo. So basically here basically what we are going to do, so first basically we are going to create the provider. Okay, so for that caching provider, this interface, and then here basically we need to use this caching caching.javax. As you can see, this is javax, this package basically provide dot get cache provider. Okay, so once we'll get the provider, then from the provider basically we are going to get the cache manager, get cache manager. Okay, caching manager. Now here basically it's a kind of return type we need to provide. So this is the interface. So okay, so what we did first of all, like we have provided the create the provider first, and then to like provided this cache manager. So based on this, so that means these two steps is done. Next actually basically we are going to provide the configuration. So how we are going to configuration? So for that actually there is one class which is called the cache configurations builder actually, like cache configuration builder. So we don't need to, here is actually one method actually, something called, yes, this one. And here first of all, like we are going to provide the what, like based on which key basically we are going to fetch the data and what will be the return type of this particular method. So for example, like it will be a integer kind of like input, and based on that maybe we are getting double in a response. So dot class, then we need to double dot class. Okay, next basically we need to provide those information. So those are coming as a resource pools builder. Okay, so here basically we need to provide this heap, how much entries, for example 100. For demonstrating this is fine. Then of heap, so what will be the size for this one, for example 10. And also here basically we need to provide the memory unit like GB or MB, or like what will be the memory GB, as you can see GB, KB, MB. So for the timing provide as MB. Next here basically we need to provide the expiry details, like how it will be expiry. Maybe in a day it will be expired at the midnight, or maybe in some other times. So those kind of configuration basically we are providing over here. Okay, so for that basically is a expiry policy builder is here. So using this we can provide those things like no expiration, so that it will not expire anything. Time to idle expirations, like if it is sitting idle after certain time, that it will time to leave, it is a live live, but after certain time it will be expire. So those kind of configuration basically we can provide over here. And for example if we are providing some time, so that basically we can provide using the durations dot and time, like of days, of hours, of minute, of nanos, so of minutes. And then here actually basically we are providing the time. Okay, so it is a kind of the configurations. So int, so obviously it's not return type A, so just let me, it's a return type of this config cache configuration builder. So it's a configurations. Okay, so this is the configurations. Obviously we can like provide more informations over here, like provide more configurations over here. Okay, one more thing, so we need to build actually, else it will. Okay, what it is saying, cat cast method receiver. Okay, okay, integer double. Yeah, now this is fine. Okay, next basically we are going to need provide another configuration which is basically related to the EHCache, that basically used to create the cache. So this configurable, actually configurable configurations we need. And here basically there is one method from EHCache configurations, and here basically we need to pass these configurations. Okay, and the return type of this basically return type of this one, Java X caching configurable configurations, and this is the cache configuration. Okay, so the configuration wise done. Now next we are going to create the cache. So how we are going to create the cache? Using the cache manager, basically we are going to create the cache. So cache manager dot create cache. So here basically we are going to provide the name, and here basically we are going to provide this configuration name. Okay, so for the time being I am keeping this name as empty. So once we will create those controller and the service layer, then I'll provide those name. Now from here we are going to return this one. Okay, so yeah, it will be a bin. Okay, so this is about this EH configurations things, and next we'll create the service layer, and from there we'll provide the caching, how we are put the data into the caching, and how we are going to get those things. So let's create the service package for this one. So here, from here basically we'll create another package dot service. So let's say create one class like calculator service, for example. Okay, so in this service basically we are going to create another service. Okay, so here basically going to create the services which will basically return us the area of a square. So let's create this public void area of square. As an input we'll get as an integer site, and here basically we can put some log so that we can understand. Okay, calculator service dot class as a logger, self logger. Okay, so as a logger we can put this information like calculate the area of a square with side of this. Okay, and then what we will do, we can just return square of it this one. Okay, so return will be a int or maybe double. Okay, so this is a kind of this method. Now basically we need to store this information in a cache. So how we are going to store this one into cache? So for that there is one annotations coming, it's like cacheable. So as you can see over here, this cacheable annotation is here, and that basically we are going to use over here. And this particular cacheable annotations we need to provide the name. So as you can see, it's having a few parameters like cache manager, cache names, resolver, condition, key. So these are the over here, and value. So we are providing the value of here. So we can put something like area of square cache. Okay, and this particular name we need to provide here because we are going to put this information into cache. So this is this annotation we are going to use so that it will be store the data into the cache, and we can get also data from the cache. Okay, now basically we are going to create one controller. So create the controller here in this package also, that's fine. for example, calculator controller. Okay, so first of all we can annotate with the REST controller, then we can put the request mapping. So for example, here we can provide the mapping API slash for example calculate. Okay, now here basically we need to use this service. So private calculator service, and then next we are going to like constructor injections, AutoWare, private calculator controller, and here basically we are going to pass this. This dot this equal to this. So as a auto constructor injection we did over here. Next basically we are going to create one API which will basically return us the area of a square. So it will be a kind of gate mapping. So public void then okay, area of a square, service dot get area of a square, and here basically we need one param, request param, int site, and this side we need to pass over here. Okay, and we need to return this value as the response entity, dot okay, and here actually you are going to pass this body also. Okay, and it will be a response entity of double. Okay, and it will be a gate mapping, and here also you can provide the path like area of square. Okay, and it will maybe we can provide this or not, that is not necessary. Okay, so this is API is ready now. So what it will do basically, what we did till now, like we have created these configurations, and here we are putting this caching name over here, that basically we have created here, and this particular method is like cacheable. We have annotated with this cacheable so that we can cache this one, so that first time it will store data, and then second time it will not provide this, will not call this method. Now we can start this one so that like we can like check. Okay, so we can start this as a Spring Boot applications, Java applications. So once we'll start, let's start this one. It will not take more time. Okay, what it is saying, consider one is overriding true. Okay, let's say get cache manager, and now try to start this one. As you can see, this cache is created, and also it's allocated this 10 MB in chunk. So as I mentioned over here, this 10 MB, so this 10 MB also like allocated. So this is also started now, right? Now like if we try to call this one, so it is return as the 200. Okay, and we can also get this log over here. Okay, so next time if we call this service, then it should not print, because it will store this information into the cache, so that it will return us the data from the cache, right? So let's clean this console, try to hit this one, and then it's getting the 200, and look, we are not getting over here anything, right? Now if we try to provide another variable like 5, then it will return us 25, and in this case we are getting the log over here. Okay, but if we try to service this again, then it will fetch the data from the caching, so it will not print the log over here. So that means caching is working fine, right? Means first time it is basically calling this service and it will store the data into the cache, and from the next time it will not basically actually call this service, it will actually get the data from the cache. Okay, next like we can put another condition over here. Basically like here basically we can put one condition like if uh, it will be within double quote, like has this input, if it is greater than 5, then only caching is allowed. Okay, that means if we try to get the data less than 5, like as you can see from the postman, we are providing one input variable, right? Like size is equal to 5 4 3 we can provide. So if it is less than 5, means only greater than 5, then only it will store the data into the cache, else it will not store the data into the cache. So let's see, it started again. So let's try to call this with 4 16, it is printed over here. Okay, so next time also it should print 16, as you can see it is also printed, right? Correct, that means it is actually basically not storing data into the caching. Again, like if we try to call this one, then again it will actually it will call this service. But if we try to means greater than 5, meaning like 8, so 64, and it will print one log over here, as you can see for the side of 8. But next time basically it will not print. Next time is it basically get the data from the cache. So this is also like we can put over here this condition key over here. So there is actually another thing that whatever the data we are putting over here, actually basically also we can't delete the data. So for example, public void that, or maybe clear cache. Okay, so for that basically we need, there is another annotation, it's called the cache evict. Okay, this, and here basically we need to provide the cache names, so it will be a multiple name can be happens, like as you can see it's the array. So for that basically it will be a curly braces, and here basically we need to provide the name. Like if it is a multiple, then we can put the multiple name as a comma separated over here. Okay, and we can put over here like all entries equal to true. Okay, and we can put over here logged like log.info clear cache. Okay, So from the controller basically we need to call this one. So for that basically uh, we can create another API, public void and then evict cache, for example. Okay, and here basically we need to call this dot clear cache, and we can say like return response entity. Okay, and here we can pass this value. Okay, and say cache successfully clean. Okay, let's call this one. Okay, so first of all try to call this one so that it will store the data into cache, right? It will store data into cache. Now if we call this one evict, so it will basically clean the cache clean successfully. Now suppose as it is clean the cache, so it will print this log, right? Because previously it will get the data from the caching. Now it should actually call the particular service. As you can see, it is calling the service. So in this way basically this cache eviction also work, like shown over here. So as a summary, like here actually basically we have configured the EHCache EH3 cache with the Spring Boot. So what we did basically, what are the like caches and how it is working, when we are going to use this one, how this caching basically work in Spring, right? So we have also used some kind of the annotation like enable caching, cacheable, cache evict. Also there are a lot more related to that annotation is there. So I will try to cover those things in my next tutorial. And like configuration of the EHCache also over there. So there's also you can use some kind of customization keys, all those things, and how we are going to like maybe next time I will try to cover another informations like how we are going to try to put some data into the database and try to like caching those things so that it will, instead of calling the database, we can maybe get the data from the cache. So this is all about and introduction kind of things about the EHCache3, how we are going to this EHCache3 into the Spring Boot 3 without XML configurations. If you guys have anything, please do let me know in the comment sections. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.